Hi, I'm Amy Leisha and I'm going to talk about 8 things that I've learned from the best book that I've ever read on women's health. This information changed my life in so many ways. The book's called The Fifth Vital Sign by Lisa Hendrickson Jack. It is 100% worth a read. The first thing I learned, your period is not a bad thing and can actually tell you so much about your overall health. Who would have thought? Your menstrual cycle is actually a vital sign, and ovulation is the main event that you should pay attention to in your cycle. Basically, it's where in the middle of your cycle, you release the egg that can potentially be fertilized if and when having a baby. It's basically the whole reason for the menstrual cycle to begin with. Both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists report that your menstrual cycle should be monitored as a vital sign in adolescence. This is pretty much because regular ovulation is only made possible when your endocrine and reproductive systems are functioning normally. So if your cycle is abnormal or irregular, it's an early warning sign of an underlying health problem. Your cycle should and normally does vary month to month as your body responds to different stresses and illnesses, so therefore can tell you a lot about what's actually going on with the rest of your health, not just your cycle alone. And it is not just required for having babies. The second thing I learned was what a normal period and menstrual cycle should actually look like. If we don't actually fit into these normal values, it's probably a good sign to start looking at our health and cycle to figure out what's actually going on and how we can normalize our values. So a normal cycle should roughly fit between 24 and 35 days, 29 days being the average. And you should have a period bleed of 3 days to 7 days with roughly about 25 to 80 mils of blood. If you use a cup, you can determine if you fit into those normal values, or there are some tools online that tell you how many soaked tampons or how many soaked pads X amount of mils looks like. So an irregular cycle only looks like a variation of more than 8 days from those norms consistently. Normal shifts of month to month changes is okay. So after you've had your period, in that window before ovulation, you are most fertile for only a 5 to 6 day period. That's it. A true menstrual cycle does require ovulation. Without it, it doesn't count. And ovulation doesn't happen the same day every month. It can vary from day 10 of your cycle all the way through day 23 on average. After ovulation becomes the post-ovulatory phase, this is where you are no longer fertile and your body starts preparing you for either pregnancy or to get a period. Now, this post-ovulatory phase should be 12 to 14 days. Anything shorter or longer, not normal. A painful period is also not normal, despite it being so common. And it definitely should not be excruciating. Extreme pain is often linked with endometriosis and is worth checking if you're experiencing that. A healthy menstrual cycle is a really good sign of optimal health, so it is worthwhile restoring your menstrual cycle to these normal healthy values. The next thing I learned was how important it is to have a healthy normal cycle. It is so important because hormonal imbalances actually increase your risk of certain diseases, and it is very well researched and not very often spoken about. So what are the risks? Estrogen and progesterone, they act completely opposite to each other. So estrogen, it stimulates cell growth, whereas progesterone actually mitigates the effect of the estrogen by stimulating normal cell development. If progesterone's not there to counter the excessive growth of estrogen, you'll end up with rapid cell proliferation, which is known to promote cell growth for certain types of cancers, including breast cancer and endometrial cancer. Research shows that women with polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS are 3 times more likely to develop endometrial cancer just because of the prolonged exposure to estrogen. Often with PCOS, women are not ovulating or they have really severely delayed ovulation, which means that their pre-ovulatory phase is extended for a really long period of time when estrogen is higher and progesterone is low. So you're getting that overexposure of estrogen. Also, women with PCOS are at greater risk of developing cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. Also, women with regular ovulation, which then followed by sufficient and normal progesterone, is associated with normal bone density. Women with insufficient progesterone are actually at greater risk of developing osteoporosis. This includes women who lose their period due to stress, overexercising, undereating, and ovulatory disorders. So it is incredibly important to have a healthy normal cycle with regular ovulation to minimize disease risk. Okay, the next thing I learned was the unspoken truth of hormonal contraception. Now, this one is a big one. Firstly, thinking that you can stop or suppress your cycle with hormonal contraception without any consequences is a lie. And it's a lie that I think we are told all the time. So hormonal contraception is basically any birth control option that consists of synthetic hormones with the aim of stopping or messing ovulation specifically, which therefore shuts down your normal natural cycle. So you don't have a menstrual cycle, you end up with a fake cycle. The two men that created the pill, they added a fake menstrual bleed to the pill so women would think that they were having a normal cycle, so psychologically that they would think that they had a regular period and it wasn't completely messing with their bodies. Also, if you've ever been on hormonal contraception, you'll probably know that you have a greater risk of deep vein thrombosis and blood clots and stroke. That's usually what the doctor rattles off nice and fast because they have to. However, they fail to mention all of the other risks associated with hormonal contraception. Hormonal contraception increases your risk of anxiety, depression, low libido, and lowered testosterone, which women do actually need testosterone. It just needs to be in a balanced level. Hormonal contraception causes nutrient deficiencies through disrupting absorption of those nutrients. Using hormonal contraception long term may end up leaving someone quite deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, which then you may develop some other health issues that you wouldn't even attribute to the pill because it's not mentioned. I've never heard it outside of reading this book. Okay, this one is absolutely crazy. They also shrink the clitoris, vulva, and ovaries. Shrink them. That is concerning, alarming, and does not sound natural or normal in the slightest. Lisa in the book describes hormonal contraception as female castration. It is a really confronting reality. Also, when coming off hormonal contraception, especially if you're trying to conceive, you should allow a transition period of 18 months to 2 years. That is a really, really long time. This is to allow your cycle to normalize, as it's been shown that hormonal contraception temporarily delays your cycle returning to normal. Long-term use of hormonal contraception increases your risk of breast cancer, cervical, and liver cancer. And why this occurs is described very well in a quote from the book. Hormonal contraceptions are infused with synthetic versions of your sex hormones, which cause varying degree of endocrine disruption. On a molecular level, the hormones in hormonal contraception are completely different to the estrogen and progesterone your body naturally makes. Hormonal contraceptions were the first drug ever developed to shut down a normal, healthy process within someone's body. Our cycles are not an illness that needs to be treated or shouldn't be undesirable or seen as dirty. Health professionals prescribe hormonal contraception, many of them to young girls, to mask their menstrual cycle health problems. And instead of trying to figure out the root cause, so many health professionals say, let me just put you on the pill. What are the consequences long term, not actually figuring out where the original problem came from? The idea behind hormonal contraception and giving the power to women to be able to choose when or not they want to have a baby, I think that's fantastic. However, there are so many more consequences than what we're actually informed of. I knew none of this stuff before reading this book. This is the kind of stuff I think we should have learnt in high school. Hormonal contraception is not required to effectively stop pregnancy. There are healthier and safer options. This leads me into the next thing I learned, which is about cycle tracking, aka the fertility awareness method. It's not the calendar method or the rhythm method. They're based on prediction methods and can be wildly inaccurate. That's not what I'm talking about here. The fertility awareness method is where you identify those most fertile days that I spoke about earlier, those 5 to 6 days, to either prevent getting pregnant or try and get pregnant. This method is basically done by tracking or observing at least 2 or more fertile signs, including your basal body temperature, cervical mucus, and cervical position, to confirm ovulation each cycle. When done correctly, the method actually provides 99.4% accuracy in preventing pregnancy. So it is just as effective, if not more effective, than some of the other birth controls. The best bonus is there's no negative health consequences. There's only positives as you learn more about your overall health in the process. Since reading this book over 3 years ago, I have effectively and intentionally avoided pregnancy with no scares. I've also been able to normalize my cycle abnormalities, including irregular cycles, short post-ovulatory phase, hormonal imbalances, really short bleeds, PMS, thyroid issues, and headaches. All because I was able to discover that I had these problems through tracking my cycle. Because I read this book, I was able to find tools that I could do to actually fix these problems and normalize my cycle health. When my husband and I do decide to start a family, I will know that my body is healthier than it's ever been. My cycle is pretty normal and my hormones as well. And I have so much more information about my fertile days and when I ovulate, which should in turn increase our chances of falling pregnant faster. In the book, Lisa talks in depth about cycle tracking, do's and don'ts to be able to do it really well. So definitely recommend reading the book that has so much more information than what I'm even touching on here. Okay, the next thing I learned was how to determine what my normal was and how to track my cycle. I learned the basic tools, where to start, and how easy it actually is to track. I didn't get it right straight away. It took a bit of time. Once I found the right tools that were going to work for me, I then started to track the variations and consistencies over time to get a good understanding of where my cycle was when I first started. From there, I compared it to the normal values that I mentioned earlier to determine, do I fit into the norms or do I have some underlying problems going on? Which I did actually have quite a few underlying problems which linked to a lot of other health issues issues that I was experiencing at the time. Example, my cycle length, my period length, my average temperatures were a little bit all over the shop and sitting a bit lower than where they should have. My cervical mucus quality was not good. Shifting and changing all of these abnormalities took time. Come to now, my cycle is completely normal, super regular. My hormone levels are sitting pretty normal. Not just my menstrual cycle health, but all of my health has improved so much with the information that I gained here. That brings me to the next thing that I learned. This was the strategies of how to fix and normalize menstrual cycle function. I didn't have PCOS, endometriosis, or really severe period pain when I started, so I didn't focus on that information. However, Lisa really does talk about it in the book. I focused on things like thyroid dysfunction, cycle length, PMS, short periods, and cervical mucus production. So the first strategy was diet and lifestyle. I really focused a lot on nutrition because that also tied into a lot of other health symptoms that I was experiencing at the time. I focused on gut health and consuming micronutrients. It's really important to replenish diminished nutrients, especially after hormonal contraception. In the book, Lisa mentions some really highly dense nutrient foods, including beef liver, which contains high concentrations of essential micronutrients. Also focusing on vitamin A, omega-3, and probiotics, as well as avoiding processed food and inflammatory seed oils. Some of the lifestyle changes I made were really prioritizing sleep. I sacrificed a lot of other things in my life, like staying out with friends late or watching an extra episode of whatever I was watching on Netflix to really optimize my sleep quality. I did also have a tendency to over-exercise and under-eat. Really not healthy, I know. When I did discover this, it was a little bit hard to shift away from that. For PMS and period pain, focusing on inflammation is a big one. To decrease pain, you want to decrease inflammation. You can do this through diet and lifestyle changes, as well as supplementation of things like zinc, magnesium, and omega-3s. Also, stress reduction and sleep. There are a number of vitamins that have also been shown to reduce PMS, including magnesium, vitamin B6, calcium, vitamin D, and Vitex. With PMS, I mostly suffered with headaches around my period. PMS headaches are often associated with an imbalance of estrogen. With the information that I learned, I tried some of the things above to normalize my hormonal levels. I did over time start to see a shift in my basal body temperature and a reduction in headaches over time. If I get them these days, it's usually because of stress. So if you're dealing with problems that you haven't figured out how to manage, it's very likely that she has strategies that are backed by research in the book. The last thing I learned was tips for planning ahead for pregnancy in the future. That may not be everyone's goal, but I know for my husband and I, we do want kids at some stage. With all the health problems that I had, I really was concerned about fertility. I don't have those concerns now that I have tools and information to really help on that journey when we get there. So what I learned was you need to give yourself roughly 3 to 6 months, maybe even 12, depending on where your health was prior, to get as healthy as possible, especially focusing on vitamin A, iron, folate, choline, vitamin D, omega-3s, and iodine. Also, prepare for a longer transition if you're coming off hormonal contraception, which we mentioned earlier, especially if you come off and have an expectation that you might fall pregnant pretty soon. If your period doesn't normalize, that might be pretty discouraging. Also, it is good to know that fertility does decline with age, especially after the age of 35. You see the most drop off. Also, male factor infertility is about 50% responsible all the time. So it's really important not only for you as a woman to optimize your health, but your partner to optimize their health as well to maximize fertility chances. Also, the more you know about your cycle, fertile days, and how sperm meets egg is only going to increase your chances of fertility. What I shared is only the tip of the iceberg as to what Lisa shares in the book. It is so informative, it's research-based, and all the references are in the book. So go read that. The information is incredibly powerful. I wish we all would have had the opportunity to learn this kind of information when we were a lot younger. How amazing would it be to be able to celebrate cycles rather than have them based around fear, shame, uncleanliness, and lack of desire of having it. I hope you found this interesting and useful. If so, subscribe to my channel and check out this video right here where I talk about 10 expensive products that drastically improved my health. Yes, they're expensive, but they were so worth the buy. Go check that out and I will see you in the next video. If you haven't clicked it, click it now.